It is 3, 2, 1, action. You are ready.
All right, so just want to start with saying thank you everyone for joining us. Um, Hello to our first ever live online virtual Q&A for BuyerFest 2020. My name is Nick. I work at Carlin. I've been the marketing coordinator there for about 2 years now. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And I'm sure everyone heard this a million times so far, but I do wish we could be all together and in person, but there's always next year, right? So for now, we can be here together on the computer, on the app, or over the phone. So thank you for being with us today again. Just a few items before we get started. We have a few options for asking questions. If you're using your computer on Teams, you can use the chat function to ask a question. You may also raise your hand by clicking that button on the bottom, and we'll unmute everyone to make sure there's time available to ask questions. And we'll let everyone know when that is. So just now a quick introduction for Dr. Raymond Cloyd, who is joining us today. Dr. Cloyd has an extension at the research appointment at Kansas State University. His research and extension program involves pest management, plant protection in greenhouses, nurseries, landscapes, turf grass, conservatories, interior scapes, Christmas trees, and vegetables and fruits. Dr. Cloyd is the extension specialist in horticultural entomology for the state of Kansas, with a major clientele that includes homeowners, master gardeners, and professional and commercial operators. The two presentations Dr. Cloyd gave are biological control, what you need to know, and an update on new pesticides. Both presentations are still available to view on the BuyerFest app, as well as the Carlin Sales website through the YouTube channel. And I just want to say quick, Dr. Cloyd, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Nick.
Now we're just we're going to go through a couple questions we received beforehand. This was either through the YouTube comments or emails we received, or even from Carlin employees who watched the videos. So, Dr. Cloyd, I want to go through the biological control first, if you don't mind. And one of the first questions was, how long can I wait until after using regular chemicals before using biological control?
That's a very good question, and it really is contingent on the materials you're using. Let me give you an example. If you're using things like insecticidal soap or horticultural oil, then you can probably wait about a couple of days before making your releases of your biological control agents. However, if you're using more conventional materials like pyrethroids, organophosphates, for example, acetylorthene or Maverick, you're probably going to have to wait 3 to 4 weeks. And the reason for that is that these materials have very long residual in the environment. They're not broken down in a greenhouse like they would in a field situation. So it's going to be contingent, Nick, on what material is being used.
Okay. And then also, when do I know when to purchase more or add them?
That's a good question, and it's contingent on your scouting program. If you're out there at least once a week or twice a week, when you start tracking that the numbers of the designated pests, and let's say two-spotted spider mite, are starting to increase, then you need to think about ordering the biologicals. However, I will say that in a lot of cases, we, in some of our research and demonstration plots with farmers and producers, we just release them every 2 weeks early in the growing season, uh, assuming, and I hate to use that term, that they're going to be past depending the crop. So, and the reason for that is if you start scouting and you see spider mites and you notice an increase, well, by the time you call, order, get it, that could be 3 or 4 days, and those 3 to 4 days could be critical in the spider mite population increasing rapidly, and consequently your biologicals may not be effective.
Okay, thank you. And then next, is prevention possible, or will they all just die before any bad bugs are there?
Yeah, that's another good question, and it really depends on the biological control agent. For example, Phytocilus persimilis, which is a specialist predatory mite for two-spotted spider mite, will only feed on that mite. So if the two-spotted spider mite populations decline, it will either starve or they'll eat each other, called cannibalism. There are a number of predatory mites that will utilize pollen and nectar and other alternate prey as a food source. And that's a good question, because biological control is prevention. You're almost releasing them before actually seeing the pest, because by the time you see it, it may be too late.
Okay. Paul just typed in a question saying, I have seen modified low-powered leaf blowers used to apply biological controls, like predatory mites. What are the professionally manufactured devices used for this?
That's a good question, because we actually did that at Kansas State University many years ago, where we had modified electric blower or gas blowers. In the middle of the tube, we inserted a device that allowed the carrier to meter through and then distribute it through the greenhouse. I'm not aware of any commercial devices that are sold. I think people have made their own. I was at several operations last year when I could travel. Makita, they took a Makita, I think it was a driller, and they modified it, and it works very well. You're using the Venturi effect, which is similar to your car with the carburetor, where you send the air through, it picks up the carrier with the mites and distributes it. And it's very labor efficient, and the mites will survive it. We've done some studies with petri dishes with water randomly distributed in the greenhouse, and you'll see the mites there, and they're moving around. So they will survive that supposedly traumatic experience. But I'm not aware, Nick, of any biological suppliers that are actually involved in selling those types of materials.
Okay, thank you. At Carlin, we do not have anything specific or have seen one that's really modified, or it's mostly people just doing their own pieces and making sure that it's turned down low enough so you're not, so when they're blowing, it doesn't injure or kill any of the biological control. So actually, we just received, thank you. Let me bring that up here. A company called BuyerFest, which is, Catherine sent that over. Thank you. We'll make sure to get everyone that link. A piece of equipment that can manually spread for larger areas. We recommend using electric blower device. So yeah, it is something that we can do. So I will, if you don't see the link, I will share this with everyone as well, just so we can take a look.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
And then I know Paul is also showing on his screen. Paul, if you want to bring a detail, mention what you're showing here on your screen.
I'm looking at a picture in I believe Inside Grower magazine. This segment was related to hemp specifically, and it shows a picture of a man that appears to be using something of a manufactured device for it. Can you guys see my camera?
I can, yes.
So here's the picture of it again.
Can't see the video. Yeah.
This
Nick?
is Catherine. Can you hear me at all?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So we get that doesn't look exactly like what we use. I get a lot of our beneficials from BioBest, and I was told that they have this NutriApp applicator. So it's like a container that you can screw onto a Makita leaf blower, and that's the brand. And so it's really light. It's like maybe 5 pounds. It's battery charged, so there's no cord or anything like that. It lasts about 20 to 30 minutes at a time, which is usually plenty of time for us to apply our mites. And so you can broadcast apply them really quickly, much quicker than just like sprinkling on a teaspoon or a tablespoon at a time. And so you can just blow it on, and it works really well. It doesn't clog up. We make sure to use the vermiculite. And if you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to take a business away from Carlin, because I know you guys supplies BioLine, and you can always buy your supplies still through BioLine. Just trying to give you guys a plug, but so.
Anything else on biological control? Any other questions? Otherwise, we do have a couple extra questions for the other presentation, the pesticide update. Raymond, what is the best preventative strategy for broad mites, as they seem to be popping up more and more in commercial production?
Yeah, that was a good question. Unfortunately, there are no preventative strategies for broad mites. The systemic insecticides do not work on mites. But I do stress the importance of knowing plants that are susceptible to broad mites. And when you are scouting and you see initial damage, or if you think it's damage, send it to a clinic for positive identification, and then you remove those plants as quickly as possible, along with the ones that are surrounding them. There is no preventive spray or anything you can do, Nick. It's basically when you see it, you have to deal with it.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is, when would translaminar, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but pesticide be better fit over systemic?
That was a really good question, and made me kind of go back and think. I think it'd be beneficial if I understand what translaminar means over systemic. Translaminar means when you spray the material, it enters the plant leaf and then sits within the mesophyll area and does not move beyond that. And it'll stay there depending on the material using, maybe 7-14 days. A systemic is when you apply it and it enters the plant and then moves or translocates throughout the plant system, gets into the stems and leaves. Systemics are mostly used for sucking insects. Aphids, whiteflies are good examples. Now, the better fit is one that many of your miticides, including Avid, Pylon, Tetrasan, Contos, and Judo, now Savant, they have translaminar activity. And if you're dealing with spider mites, that's when you'd want to use like a material like a translaminar miticide, because systemics will not kill spider mites. So that would be one fit for translaminars when you're doing spider mites. There's also a cost or labor issue associated with some of these materials, and also the plant size. If you're dealing with larger plants, that it might take a systemic material longer to move, then it might be prudent to go with a translaminar to quickly kill them directly and then have a little bit of residual there overall. So the other one, if you're growing vegetables, obviously I wouldn't use a systemic, but you can use a translaminar early on in production and not having to worry about residues when it's sold or leaves the greenhouse. So that was a good question, and those are my that would be my response why translaminar might be a fit for one scenario over systemic.
Okay, thank you. We did have another question come in from Lynette about, does this need to be done in shade to release? I'm thinking with the blowers again, I'm thinking that's what she was asking that on with the biological control.
When you're releasing biologicals, we tend to release them early in the morning or late in the evening. You don't want them sitting out there in the heat of the day. So release them early morning, whether you're using the blower or the salt and paper, well, either sachets or whatever, or late in the evening. Give them time to acclimate and get used to the environment. And then after that, they should be out there searching for their prey.
Excellent. Anyone else have any questions that they would like to open up to the floor, ask Raymond?
This is Catherine again. Can you talk about, I may have missed it if you talked about it in your presentation, but Pratia and Cerisa use compared to like Mainspring and Aria. I see that like Mainspring, the label you can drench, but the other two you can't. Can you, any ideas on why, or what's the best what's the best option out of the three?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mainspring, Praudia, and Sarissa are all in the group 28 Iraq. They have similar modes of action. Mainspring has been around a longer period of time. You can apply it as a spray and a drench. Sarissa has got cyclonitrile, which is very similar to the chlornitramide in Mainspring. And it's not a true, it's a systemic, but it has such a low water solubility, and we're talking some of the lowest of the systemics, that it's not really an effective systemic. Now, Pradia is a combination of Sarissa and Aria flunicamide, and flunicamide, like Endeavor, and is systemic. They move throughout the plant like a true systemic through the xylem and phloem. So when you look at a label for Sarissa, you won't see some of the sucking insects like mealybugs on there, where you'll see it on the Pratia label. We've worked with those products quite a bit and continue to, but that would be the main difference between among those three. But remember, they have very, very similar modes of action. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you explained it better. I guess where I'm coming from is I've been using Mainspring a lot for a drench, and we find it pretty effective, but I worry a little bit about overusing it. And it's pretty much our only control for thrips that really works well to use in conjunction with biological control. And I've been asked by reps to try Cerisa and Pratia, and I'm kind of hesitant because Mainspring works so well. And I guess I'm wondering, should I switch, or if Mainspring works, okay, stay with it. I do fog sometimes with Aria, and I think it works okay. I don't think it makes a big difference. Not as much as drenching with Mainspring.
Yeah, the only issue would be that Mainspring and Cerisa and Pratia have the same mode of action. So
Right. It
if you
would be
even
just a
switch,
switch. It would
yeah,
be a
so
switch. It
but
wouldn't
it
be
would
in
not be a
conjunction.
different mode of action. So you're actually exposing the thrips population to the same mode of action. In this case,
Yeah.
28 is the ryanodin receptors working on the calcium channels in the muscles. So if you wanted to switch, you'd have to go to a different mode of action. Something like, well, if you're looking not for drench, but like Pylon or Avid or Conserve, or some of the other materials for thrips. But going from Mainspring to Pratia would be exposing those thrips to the same mode of action within those generations.
Right. But just for like, do you think out of those three options, any one is better than the other one?
I really think that for thrips on especially in their foliage. Now, if Mainspring will not work on thrips when they're in flower, I think at this point the data is clear that Mainspring is effective as a drench. Now, we did some work with, I believe it was Sarissa as a spray, and it worked, but it's not a drench application. So
Okay.
if you're comfortable with Mainspring, then I would say, and I'm for education, I'm not a salesperson, I would say stick with that. And then if you wanted to use another mode of action, that's what you would do to minimize the prospects of resistance.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. That answered it.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Good question.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Anyone have any other questions? If not, like we recorded this, so you'll be able to go back to it. I'll make sure to make it available to everyone who is registered for BuyerFest. And then just want to say a quick thank you to Dr. Raymond Cloyd for joining us this afternoon or this morning, wherever everyone is. And if anything else, please feel free to contact Carlin or Dr. Raymond Cloyd, any of us, if you have any further questions. More than happy to answer them for you.
Yes, I work through email and phone and landline and cell, and I'd be happy to address any questions you have. Yes.